Default tokens do not look that great in Foundry, but there is a better way. If you are on version 12 or higher of Foundry, I am going to show you how to use dynamic token rings to make your tokens pop, make your players excited, and make your canvases look a lot nicer than this. To start, you're going to need several pieces of software. Obviously, you're going to need Foundry itself. If you don't have Foundry, you need to get Foundry, because I'm not teaching you for Roll20. Second, you're going to need GIMP. GIMP is a free photo manipulation tool. It is an alternative to Photoshop. You could probably use most of my steps here in Photoshop, but you'd have to pay a lot of money, and you don't want to do that. Finally, you're going to need the token templates from Foundry itself. These are available on the Dynamic Token Rings article on the Foundry webpage, and I'm going to show you how to do this in version 13 of Foundry. The process is pretty much identical for version 12, and version 12 is what I still use for my personal game. If you look under the Creating Dynamic Tokens subject artwork heading, you're going to find a link that says available here. This is where you're going to download your templates. I've already downloaded this, I've already installed GIMP, and I already have Foundry. The first thing you're going to do now that you've got all your software set up is correct the templates. The templates that you downloaded from Foundry have some small errors that we're going to fix. Here are the 3 templates they're going to give you. They're going to be in the Photoshop format, which will still work with GIMP. It's going to have a 256, a 512, and a 1024, and these refer to the size of the pixel. This will be 256 by 256 for your very smallest creatures, usually a creature that will only take up a quarter of a tile size, or a grid square, I mean. 512 is a medium or small creature, and then anything larger than medium is going to be a 1024. You're going to want it to be a big file so that you can capture as much detail as possible, because it's going to look big on the actual canvas. If this artwork was too small, this would be a very crunchy, pixelated image if you put it in a 512 container. Let's start with the 1024 size. If we double click on this, it's going to open in GIMP. If it doesn't open automatically, you might need to open GIMP and then drag and drop the file in. You're going to see this compatibility notice warning. I've never had a problem, so just click OK and ignore it. And here's the template as it is. It has a placeholder. If we move this away, you can see it has a ring, which is very helpful for sizing your images, and then it has this shadow. Here's the stuff we've got to do. For the shadow, on the Effects Above tab, down here in the bottom right, see the mode is set to pass through? That's bad. Don't know why it's that way. We want to set it to normal. For the shadow selectively erase, we're going to click on this, right click, add layer masks, and we're going to click the top option, white, full opacity. We're also going to click on the portrait placeholder and do the exact same thing. Add a layer mask, white opacity, full opacity. This is mostly a reminder for myself for when I put a piece of artwork under the portrait tab to also add a layer mask eventually. And then we need to look at the example masks that they have given us from Foundry. If you look here under the large 1024 size, zoom in. What's that? There's a line of pixels that is not set to full black opacity. And this occurs on the large and the small size, so the 1024 and the 256. It is easily correctable, but it's something to be aware of for those sizes. They have this extra line of pixels that we want to remove. Pressing P to make sure we have our paintbrush selected, we're going to make sure we have black as the option on top. You can either press this little arrow or you can simply press X. once you get used to it, the keyboard shortcuts are a lot better and faster. And we simply are going to draw a line over on top of that line of pixels with your mouse. Just hold the left mouse button, move it all around, and now the template looks good. Be aware, if you're going to be using the example masks a lot, you're going to want to check each one. The top one looks fine. I don't see any line of pixels. The top left one looks bad. I see a line of pixels. So if you are going to use the quick and easy method, which I will teach you shortly, you are going to want to make sure that you go through for each of the sizes and remove that line of pixels. It's not the end of the world if you leave them on there, but there's a chance that your artwork might have some bleed through if you're not careful. Again, probably not the end of the world, but for the large size and the small size, I would be careful using these example masks. For some reason, they fixed this on the medium size. I have a theory as to why it is the way it is, but again, it's not that big of a deal, so we're not going to worry about it. So once you've fixed up the ones you're going to use the most, for me, that's mostly just going to be the bottom left and the bottom right. We're going to save this. You do not need to save it in a special way. You just Ctrl S or save. It's going to save this as an XCF, which I'm guessing is a GIMP specific file format, and there's no reason to not do that. I've never had trouble. Once you save these, I would delete the old PSD Photoshop files just so you don't confuse yourself and start using the ones that you haven't fixed. So we've fixed the big template. The medium template does not have any problems, so we shouldn't need to do that much to it. The only thing we need to do is change the effects above to normal and then add a layer mask. And that's for our convenience. You could edit it as is, but it's going to be a lot simpler and easier if you do it this way. So again, save the file. And then finally, we open the 256, we set OK, and set this away from pass-through and add the layer mask to the shadow and to the placeholder. Again, the placeholder is a reminder. And just for convenience, if you hide the placeholder and zoom in, you can see the tiny little line, that dastardly little line on the default mask that we want to get rid of. And then save it. All right, we have set up our templates. I'm going to go over a few quick shortcuts on GIMP that are going to help you move around faster. P for paintbrush, and when you're holding paintbrush, X to switch the color. So if I'm on the portrait here, it's white, and now it's black. Those are not going to stick around, so I'm just going to close this actually when I'm done. Another helpful tool is the scale tool. You can do Shift S for default, and that just lets you move things around and resize them very easily. You move them around by touching them in the middle, and you scale them just by holding to one of the 4 quadrants and then holding and moving it around. Very useful. The fuzzy select tool, you press U, and that is also extremely helpful for selecting a bunch of similar sized pixels, like so. I recommend on your right window having it set to selection editor, and that just lets you know what you're currently holding in your selection. To unselect everything you're currently holding, press Ctrl Shift and A, and it goes back to black. The final one that I would do is once you've selected something and you want to invert your selection, in other words, hold everything that you're not holding right now, if you press Ctrl and I, that will automatically invert the selection. But you can also press this little button here to do the exact same thing. Again, the shortcuts make it faster, but you can just move around by clicking. With that out of the way, let's start making some tokens. This is the 512, so we're going to start by making a medium-sized guy. In my Foundry folder under Assets, I have the artwork already here, and I'm going to grab our bugbear. If you look, he's being cut off right now, but that is okay. We are going to press Shift S to open up the scale tool and move him around. I like to hide the placeholder as soon as it's not needed anymore, and we can move our bugbear anywhere we want, and I like to keep the token background visible for this so that I can better see what this is going to look like in the finished product. For this particular token, you can see he's a very long creature, and we don't want all of his length necessarily. What we do want is his spears poking out, and I think it also would look nice to have his elbows kind of crossed. This way he fills up most of the image with his snarly face, and we don't see the relatively boring feet and cloak and legs. To show you the quick way, we're going to use one of these preset masks. We drag the mask up on top of the character, make it visible by clicking the little eye checkbox, and we set the mode away from normal to erase. Now, if we hide our token ring, we're pretty much done. This is what I do when I have a batch of NPCs and they all need tokens. This is a quick and easy way. You don't need to adjust the shadow, and you don't need to move him around anymore. If you did feel like you needed to move him around, you can still move him, and it'll automatically remove the section that's underneath the bottom half. So that's the advantage of this, is it's great for like, how is this going to look? And then if you go up to the portrait tab, it shows you, and you can see the part that's not being cut off underneath when you've got the scale tool open specifically. But once we're good with where he's at, I can show you how to be a little more specific and not just use the default mask here. So first, we're going to select the fuzzy tool, which is the magic wand, press on the black section here, and then press Ctrl I to invert our selection. Now on our artwork, we right click and we're going to add the layer mask. Instead of doing white, we're going to do selection because we've already got it selected. This is going to have the exact same effect as if you had dragged and dropped the default up above and set it to erase. However, it is a lot easier for us to edit this version because it's a mask. The mask is going to be your bread and butter here on GIMP. So with the mask selected, if you right click on it down here and you pick up your paintbrush, if you just start drawing with black, it's going to erase. And if you start drawing with white, if you switch it back around, it adds that right back. And what I want to do is I want to get some elbows back into this image. We don't need to have his whole sword and legs, but the elbows at least. Who am I to deny a man his elbows, you know? And by just simply drawing over the image, you can see exactly what's coming back. Get the arm, and then when you switch back to white, it lets you erase. And I'm just gonna finish that up there. It's not the most neat thing in the world, see if I can get it a little better. Okay. And we're just going to delete that extra because that's pretty much the length of his arm there. All right. So that took a little bit more time, but it did allow us to get a little bit more of that artwork onto our token. And finally, we're going to adjust the shadow here. If I hide the artwork, you can see this black curve is the shadow. And this basically allows you to just kind of highlight the actual artwork so it pops out a little bit more. And you just select the white mask we created earlier and draw over whatever the actual artwork is and leave the gray wherever there is a blank space. And that just kind of creates consistency across all of your tokens when you do that. Okay, our bugbear is looking pretty good. So we're not going to click save, we're going to hit export. And I am going to do export as. I'm going to select the right folder, go to data, go to assets, go to tokens, and I'm just going to set him as bugbear underscore token. We're going to save this as a WebP. There's almost no reason you should be saving these as a PNG. WebPs are faster to load and smaller. They take up a little more CPU resource, but every modern computer should be able to handle it. Once you put .webp, it will automatically save it in the WebP format. You press export and it'll pop up with the final window. I have it set to lossless, and if you are really concerned about space, you can undo it from lossless and set it to 80 or thereabouts. I don't think that's a problem. I think you can just set it to lossless. So you press export and our work is done, at least for that guy. So let's pull up our creature here in Foundry. I'm using Pathfinder just as an example because it's pretty feature complete. Press on the Appearance tab and we're going to browse to that bugbear token we made. We're going to make sure that the ring is enabled here. And going to update that token. Now when I drag him down, look at that. He looks exactly like he did. He's popping out of the artwork, and he's got this beautiful border from Foundry. Now you are going to want to make sure in your Foundry settings that you've got the fit mode set to standard. If you leave it set to grid, it will not display the dynamic art correctly. That's pretty much the only default setting in Foundry you need to change to make this look good. However, you can tweak the token a tiny bit more if you want it to fill up a little bit more of the grid space. You can see that there's a pretty good gap. And if we just want him to look a little bit bigger, go to the scale and increase it to 0.1, 1.1 total for a medium-sized creature. If you press update token, it won't update automatically because I did it to the prototype. But when you redrag it out, you can see it's just a little bit closer and it looks a little bit nicer. That's extremely important for large creatures and not as important for medium ones. Let's do a large creature next. Let's do our forest troll here, Bomella. If we go over to the 1024 size, we're going to do the exact same process, but because it's a bigger piece of artwork, you're going to see a lot more of the actual art popping out when you make it. So, got to make sure this is visible and hide the placeholder. And I'll show you the ring so we can resize it easier. Right off the bat, this is looking good. We're going to move it around just a little with the scale tool, just so that that bit at the top isn't cut off. Honestly, don't need to make any other changes. It already looks great. You can see that from top to bottom, she's filling up the whole canvas, which is more or less what you want. You want the most interesting art to be in the canvas. Anything else is going to get cut off. So I'm going to go down to my mask, the default mask, click on it, press U to pull up my fuzzy grabber again, click, and now you can see I'm selecting that, invert, add layer mask, selection, and you can see it was really fast. However, it did take away her big ogre arms, or I guess troll arms. And we want those. We want to see the guns, but we don't want to see the toes. So let's set our paint tool to white here, and we're just going to draw that detail back on. We're editing the mask here, not the artwork itself. The masks basically let us edit the art without destroying it completely. So if you make a mistake, it's really easy to just change the color to the opposite of what you're using, black or white, and then immediately erase. You can see I got some little details here. I'm going to shrink the size of my brush using Ctrl Alt and the scroll wheel, and we're just going to quickly delete those little scrubbies that came up. Those are from the toes and legs. It's definitely a Foundry rule not to have the toes visible unless your players consented to that kind of game. So make sure that you're hiding the toes wherever possible when you're making your tokens. And I'm gonna make my brush size bigger again so I can get through this a little faster. And make sure there's no little holes poking out. And then just delete the scrubbies. Okay, our troll is looking great. Her fists are popping out. The only thing that we need to edit at this point is the shadow. As you can see, it's covering over her artwork, and we want the artwork to be as visible as possible. So we click on the mask and then just start drawing with our paintbrush again. And it's okay if some of the detail gets lost, and it doesn't need to look perfect because your players aren't really going to see this that much. It's going to get covered up by the token ring. It's good enough. Well, actually, for the tutorial, you know, because you guys are here, not because I'm a perfectionist. All right, our artwork looks great. This is exactly how you want it. So we get to export as, make sure we go back to the right place under data and assets and tokens, and we just need to set this to, I'm just going to put troll token.webp. We export it, lossless is good, got a little progress bar, and we're done. So now we go back to Foundry. We hit the prototype token and select it. Make sure that the ring is enabled. And since this is a large token, we want to make double sure that we set the scale. I would set a large token to 1.2. And if it was a very large token, like a gargantuan size for Pathfinder or huge, I would set it to 1.3. For the scale, and that's just so your artwork fills the whole screen. Wow, looking a lot better. You can see that her fists are popping out even over the actual space that her token should occupy, and she looks a lot more ready to rumble here on the canvas. Not a big difference, you know, in the long term, but your players will certainly notice, and this makes it look a lot more premium. And then I'm finally going to show you how to oversize a token. Say you've got a medium creature or a large creature, but you've got some great artwork and you really want it to look like it's bursting out of the token. We can do that with a little bit of adjustment to the canvas size. So let's head back to our bugbear here, and we're going to delete him. Back to the shadow realm. And let's add an angel in here. We look to this angel, and I select the scale, it'll show you the whole thing. Look at that beautiful artwork. I don't want to cover any of that up, except for the toes, which are illegal in Foundry. So to oversize this token, this is the 512, we're going to click on Image and go to Canvas Size. Here you're going to need to do a tiny bit of math. If I just pull up the calculator, and if we want to boost this up, I would say that 1.5 would be a good increase in size. If you do it by 2.5, or if you do it by 2, then you've doubled the size of this token. You've turned a medium creature into a large creature, which is a bit much, you know. So you're going to take your multiplier and you're going to multiply the canvas size by it. So 512 pixels by 1.5, 768. If it does not add it to both, make sure you add it to the width and the height. Sometimes when you press this link, it will do it. The little chain link, I don't know why it doesn't always work, but then the next step is super important. Do not forget this. Press the center button. It will automatically move your guy to the center, which is extremely important to make sure that the proportions stay correct for your masks. Oops, I reset it. Well, I don't know why it's not linking them together, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, so you can see that by resizing the canvas, we've made the artwork fill much more. So we're going to shrink it down just enough so that the tips of the wings are inside the picture and also the tips of the fingers. This is about how you want it. You want your artwork to fill your canvas. But if you look, when I press the ring, that's how much of the ring it's going to occupy. So it's going to burst out an additional bit and look really awesome for your players. And then it's the same process as before. You're going to grab your default mask. You can see the yellow border showing what that normally is. Press U to pull up your fuzzy tool. Ctrl I to select the opposite of what you're holding, and then add that selection as a layer mask. You can see that it didn't do a perfect job because we moved the canvas size, but it's enough to go on. Ctrl Shift A to deselect everything, and let's grab that paintbrush by pressing P. And make it very big here, and draw the wings back on. And also that badass hammer that the angel is carrying. As you can see though, I've got some illegal action there. We'll cover that up very quickly. Make sure everything's looking good. There's a little hole there, I covered that up. Alright, we're already almost done. You can see how fast this process is once you get used to it. However, we do want to edit the shadow still. So use black to take away and white to add back. And just add the tiny little rim there. Just because I want this angel to be perfect, you know. Real messenger of the gods there. Whoops, added a little too much. But with masks, it's so easy to just easily take that back away. All right, our angel is looking great. So we're going to export as before. And when you export from the same template, if you just delete your layer and start over, it will save you the location that you last did, which is convenient when you're doing a bunch at once. But again, don't save over your templates because then you'll have to redo them. So over here in Foundry, we pull up the prototype and we have to do some work to make this look good. We select the file. However, we need to make sure that 2 settings are set here or it's not going to look right. We need to make sure the scale is set correctly and the scale correction is set correctly. I'm going to show you how it looks when it's wrong. If we just leave these both to 1, which is their default setting, but we've got the dynamic token enabled, look what happens when we drag her out of the folder. What? She's tiny and she's got a huge gap between the art and the token. So we need to make sure that we set the subject scale correction to the amount we multiplied the artwork by. In this case, we did 1.5. And then for the scale, we need to do again 1.5. And I would say we did the work. Let's add an extra 0.1 to make sure that she's big. This would be the same as setting a normal medium creature to 1.1, but you have to add the 0.5 in with the subject scale correction. We update, delete the old one. Oh my gosh, perfect. She looks awesome. So we've gone from 0 to hero with Foundry Dynamic Token Rings. Hopefully you could follow along quickly. If you need any of the resources, like the download links, they will be listed in the description. Happy pathfinding, Dungeons & Dragoning, or whatever game you'd like to play in Foundry.